And, we always like to feel it, don't we? But God likes for you to faith it more than he likes you to feel it, because when the feelings aren't there, what are you going to do? You got to live by faith. The Bible, Paul encourages the church at Corinth that, we walk by faith, not by sight, not by what we see, not just by what we feel, not just by what makes sense, but sometimes we got to do things when they don't make sense. You hear me? You feel me right now? Are you in this room with me? Do you need a shot of Holy Ghost caffeine right now? Okay. But, we've been in this series called 18, and it's been a super exciting series for me just to lay out some key things that I believe are insights into setting up our year in a healthy way. And these themes are going to run deep and run strong throughout the year in many different ways. And so if you've been tracking with us for the first 2 weeks, I'd encourage you to just keep those things in mind, because my desire, and I believe God's desire, is that you wouldn't just come and eat on a Sunday and not digest what you've eaten. A lot of the church, not you guys because you guys are awesome, eats on a Sunday, leaves, and goes to the bathroom, the spiritual bathroom, and kind of vomits it out. You get what I'm saying? It's good for a moment, but then they realize, oh my gosh, this is going to require too much of me. I actually got to do and live it out. It's gonna cost too much. The price is too big. The sacrifice is too big to live it out. So it's like you go to the spiritual bathroom when you get home and you know what I'm talking about. It's harder to digest some things sometimes, but it's in the digestion process, and it's in the letting it get down into your system that begins to effectively change your body chemistry. That's why, if you're a bodybuilder, you got to eat a lot. You got to eat the right things, and it's hard, and you got to sometimes force things down, and you got to keep it down. You know what I'm talking about? To build the body. God wants to build you up this year. And so he wants you to digest some things that are going to be hard for you to digest. But if you can just stick it through and pay the price and pay the sacrifice, health is going to happen to your life spiritually in 2018. And so we've been in this series called 18. It's a 5-week series, and our focus is really around this idea of developing sight for flight and how God wants you to take off in this season. He wants you to soar in this season. He wants you to rise, to take off from the runway. Some of you have been sitting on the runway for way too long. You've been waiting for the plane to take off, but he wants to set your sight. He wants to get your sight calibrated first before you start your engine to move forward. Because if you can't see where you're going, you will not be able to catch the right wind, to catch the right dynamics, to take flight, to take off in life. And so the series scripture has been based around Psalms 119, verse 165. I always think it's very funny saying that. This is a big number. 119, verse 165. Those who love your instructions have great peace and do not stumble. And I believe that the next 5 weeks, or really we're in the third week, so the next 3 weeks, including today, we're receiving some instruction that I believe will give us the peace that we need to run strong for the season, to run strong for this year. God does not want you to stumble. Will you stumble? Probably. But his heart is that you would not have to stumble because you have his peace leading you in every situation. Often we stumble because we lose his peace in situations that are in direct contradiction to what we believe should be our experience in life. And so we're getting his instructions to take flight. But there's so many things, pressures coming against us, trying to hold us down. There's bad perspectives. There's bad belief systems. I call them bad BS in our life. You have a lot of bad BS in your life. You got to get out of the way. Bad belief systems. You got to flush out. Some of you are so spiritually constipated. You need to eat some heavenly bran in the morning when you get up and let God detox your system, because there's bad belief systems that are directing your life and governing your life and dominating over your life and are not going to allow you to take flight the way that you're called to take flight in 2018. And so I'm hoping that as we lay some more groundwork, God's going to heal you. He's going to set you free a little bit. He's going to open up your heart. He's going to open up your mind, because like I said, there are things that are coming against us. There's bad attitudes. Some people call them the Beatitudes. You know, Jesus gave the Beatitudes, and then there's the Beatitudes. How many know what I'm talking about? How many have a Beatitude problem in here? A bad attitude problem. Come on, all of us at times we do, right? All of us have bad attitudes at times. You know, I have to wrestle as a communicator, as somebody that tries to make sure that whatever I speak on, I'm living out, right? I'm not getting up here and trying to speak on things that I don't feel are in my life at some level. Doesn't mean that I'm perfect in them. Doesn't mean that you can look at me and it's fair for you to say, well, if he's speaking on it, he's just perfect in it. And he's never going to fail in it. Man, I struggle with Beatitudes sometimes about things. I struggle a lot sometimes with perspective about things, even though internally I understand the nature of God so much in these areas that if I choose, it just takes me a moment sometimes, okay, I can see it. I might have a moment of confession with my wife. It's like we set up our little booth at home and I confess all the things that I'm ticked off about, not really, but I do. I'm a verbal processor. My wife's a little bit of the opposite. I got to sit her down and force her sometimes to verbally process. But I'm a verbal professor. I'm a verbal professor, yes. I'm a verbal processor. And so I have to sometimes process things, and then I come into perspective with a good attitude to see those things right. But sometimes, and I honestly believe this about everybody, like counseling is good for anybody. That's the reality. Everybody should at some level go through counseling. Because you go through counseling doesn't mean that you're a bad person or screwed up. Everybody needs counsel. In fact, if you don't have any counsel in your life at all, you're in big trouble. That's just a reality, okay? You can't do life on your own. You need people. You need people to challenge you. You need leaders in your life. You need mentors. You need people to process things with. Sometimes the reason why we don't move forward in life is because we have an attitude against processing things with certain people. We have an attitude that says, well, they're not in my situation, so how can they give me counsel? They've never experienced what I've experienced, so how can they give me? If you only went to the people that had your experience to get counsel, you'd have very little counsel in your life. And let me just tell you, when you put God in the picture, God in you and God in the other person is the same God. And so you don't always need somebody to know exactly what you're going through to get counsel from them. Because I don't know about you, but I believe Jesus is the best counselor despite the person's experience, lack of experience or experience. Sometimes my counsel, the greatest counsel that I get, is from my kids. Things that they say randomly that shock me or that make me aware of my character flaws. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes that's the greatest counsel. And the greatest realization, they don't have to have the same experience as me to help me grow, which tells me God in them is the same God in me. It doesn't matter necessarily the amount of experience that they have. What matters is that God is a part of the equation. So I can't have a bad attitude towards. How many in this room have ever had a bad attitude towards an individual before they even maybe knew them? Yeah, I think everybody, right? Like, we judge, right, by the outside. We always say, I want to be super spiritual, judge on the inside, look at the heart. But there's a reality here. Nobody has the spiritual depth in here to flawlessly look past what they see and always see the heart of a person. Nobody does. You all judge. You all profile people at some level. You judge by, I had the great privilege of experiencing this on the one end as like a little bit of a victim. You can feel bad for me. When I started in ministry, I had long dreadlocks. I had big, thick, gauged earrings in my ears, big, scary goatee. I didn't look like a minister. And people always judged me. Like, everywhere I went, they're like, I'd be in the washroom, and they talk about, like, the guest speaker they're excited to hear. And they're like, yeah, you excited too? And I'm like, yeah. And then I was the guest speaker. And they would apologize often to me for assuming that there's no way this guy could be the guy. We were looking for the suit. We were looking for the 7-piece suit with the logo, that's maybe in their mind. Or people just they always judge the outside. Even no matter how spiritual we are, we all struggle with this, with a bad attitude towards somebody. And I think being in a public setting on any level, whether you're a communicator, whether you're a politician, whether you're in some sort of entertainment, media, as soon as you're in some form of limelight, it's very easy for people to have a bad attitude towards those people they've never met before based upon what they hear. Or even based upon one bad experience, right? You know what I'm saying? One little thing they say, it's twisted, it's taken out of context, and then the attitude occurs. You know, some of my greatest relationships to this day, thank God for a good wife, are the people that whether it was on their end or my end, there was a struggle with an attitude towards that individual that robbed us from having a relationship. There was a leader in Michelle's life years ago, before we were married, actually, and I don't think we were even dating at this point, but she has been in one of the schools that I was teaching on the supernatural, and she was one of my students. Yeah, it was like a teacher student, and that wasn't sketchy or anything. I had no feelings for her at that point, but this is years ago, and I was leading a team down to Mardi Gras, to go onto the streets and just love on people and talk about Jesus to people, one of the greatest parties. And I remember I was trying to encourage her and a few of her friends to come on this outreach, and they had all been through my schools, and so the church that she was going at the time, she approached actually one of the leaders in that school. I think she even brought my manual that I was teaching from, and to find out what they thought. And this person didn't really know me, and kind of looked at the manual, looked at me, and I don't know what kind of determined his response, but he was kind of like, who is this guy? He seems super sketchy, like this prophetic teacher teaching on the supernatural. Look at his manual. Like, I don't know if I think it's a good idea you go. And there was a little bit of an attitude. And then obviously when I heard that, I was like, oh, who is he? You think he is? You know, a little bit of attitude back, you know. But my wife had this sense that there was actually destiny over our relationship. That despite the attitudes towards each other, without really even having a conversation, that, hey, some of the greatest relationships have to go through some of the greatest conflicts. And so she always felt that and told me that. And so now it's funny because, you know, after we got married and everything, to this day, this individual is like, they're like super close to us. And we're super tight with them. But we had to move through our attitude towards each other. We still talk about it to this day. Some of my other friends that I have right now, it comes out later on. Like, it came out recently. I was somewhere recently a few weeks ago, actually last week, a leader in Canada. And we were talking. And she said to me, now, like, we're connected, and I've ministered at their church, like, you know, a few times, and we're connected in relationship. And she said to me, she confessed, she's like, yeah, when I first met you, I thought you, like, were a snob. I'm like, you what? Like, I wanted to understand, like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you just weren't very friendly. You didn't talk. You know, I met you at that conference, but she didn't have context, because I remember it was at this conference. It was a really bad experience. I wasn't speaking at it. I was there to support somebody. I almost walked out of the meeting. It was just, there was stuff going on that was totally just messed up. And I remember being in this meeting, and I kind of ticked off a little bit. And maybe that's the vibe she was getting, but she interpreted that as I was a jerk. I didn't like her, you know, and it kind of stopped. It probably slowed down the pursuit of that relationship. You get what I'm talking about? And now we're super close, and it's awesome, and there's destiny on that relationship. I've heard it from other people too. And you know, even in our church culture, like, you know, if I don't say hi to somebody, it's like if I walk by them and I don't give them like the most beautiful smile and look, like, oh, he's pissed off at me, he doesn't like me, you know, he doesn't, you know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? It's like we have to be so careful to protect our attitude because we just don't have context. And I want to give you today the antidote to overcome some of this stuff in our life. I really do, because God wants to build deep relationship. I believe this faith, write this down, faith, hope, and love is some of the greatest antidote to overcome a bad attitude in life. When you can look at somebody or a situation, and even above all your profiling, all of your non-objective responses towards them, all of your biases towards them, all of your judgy nature towards them, you look at them in the eyes of faith, hope, and love. And, 1 Corinthians 13 says that love trusts. Love always believes the what? Best. So look at them and say, you know what? Maybe they're not always like this. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe this is just where they're at. Hey, I'm like Jesus, going to be the bigger guy or the bigger woman in this situation. I'm not going to be the victim. Be like, oh, he doesn't like me. He's a jerk. See, nobody likes me at that church. I feel rejected. Nobody talked to me. Da, 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 da. Well, I believe this, that sometimes rejected people create their own rejection. Hurt people hurt people. You come in with a whole bunch of junk. The reality of it is, most of the time, the reason why you don't move forward in life, or we don't move forward in life, is because we carry heaviness. And then we put that heaviness on other people, and now everything that they do, we actually judge through our own issue. We are projecting our own struggle on people. Oh, they're just like everybody else. No matter how accepted one may feel, they still feel rejected because in them, they don't feel accepted by God. So no matter where they go, no matter how much awesome treatment they have, they still have this thing where I'm not good enough, not worthy, nobody likes me. Even though people are loving on them, they're showering them with gifts, they pray for them, they take them out. Still, it's not enough. You guys know people like that? No one in this room is like that. Faith, hope, and love, one of the greatest antidotes. I heard this. I looked on this on Instagram yesterday, and I was reading through a bunch of the posts, and I saw this one post by a pastor down south that was releasing a new book. And I love the title. It really hit me. The title was, Love Like You Have Never Been Hurt. Oh, what would that look like? Love like you've never been hurt. Because hurt people, right? Rejected people reject people. Wounded people wound people. That's just the nature of how we attract what we are. And we attract more of it. What would it be like in this season to learn, to go on a new learning curve of loving people like you've never been hurt before in your life? I can hear a pin drop in here. Either you're processing that or you're just really offended right now. I can't discern what it is. And I've seen this, and we're connected to this one individual who is connected by blood to one of the top celebrities that you probably see many ads about all the time, and whether it's right or wrong, rumors, gossip, whatever it is, and some of you probably engaged in the gossip, and it's unfortunate, but we've had the privilege of ministering to this individual and talking to them and walking them through, helping them through some processes and encouraging them and hearing their story. And one of the things that just always makes me so sad is that when you're at that level, the amount of warfare that you're under and the pressure that you're under and the way the media slimes you, what it does is it breaks down your ability to trust people. And when you're at that level of being in the limelight, people just want to get around you because of your name. They want to be in relationship with you because of how that makes them feel. They feel significant, and then really there's an agenda. And so as a result, their relational circle gets so small, and they have a hard time trusting people, and they develop maybe a bad attitude towards specific types of people. Maybe it's the church they develop a bad attitude towards, They develop a bad attitude. I heard this one story of this famous rapper that just started going, that many of you would know, just started going to church, and he was in a recovery phase of being a recovering addict, and he's known as one of the top rappers probably in this day, hip-hop artists in this day, and he started going to church, and everybody just was storming him every week with getting autographs, so he stopped going to church. And I think that in that culture, it's so sad that it's so easy to lose trust. But I feel like a word for us in this season is that if we want to get and represent more of who God is in our own life, we have to love like we've never been hurt. Love like we've never been hurt. I love what Paul says. I'm going to jump into this a little bit now. In 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3, he talks about what we need to realize if we're going to fight against these attitudes that are coming against us. He says this, for although we live in the natural realm, we don't wage a war or a military campaign employing human weapons, using manipulation to achieve our aims. Instead, our spiritual weapons are energized with divine power to effectively dismantle the defenses behind which people hide. Verse 5. You with me? Is this on the screen? Verse 5. We can demolish, listen to this, we can demolish every deceptive fantasy that opposes God and break through every arrogant attitude that is raised up in defiance of the true knowledge of God. What he's basically trying to communicate here, I'm just going to give you the Coles notes. He's trying to communicate that we live in a spiritual world. And unless we realize that, we will not be using the proper weaponry. He also says to the church at Ephesus while he's in jail in Ephesians 6 that we don't wrestle and fight against people. We actually fight against the things that are influencing the people, the spiritual realm around the people. So Paul has a real confidence in this reality that our wrestle is not just horizontal, it's actually vertical. And so he's telling the people in the church at Corinth, he's saying, listen, guys, don't let the warfare be fought the way you think it should be fought. Realize that there are attitudes and thoughts coming into your mind that are distorting the truth and distorting what's really going on, and as a result, you're being taken out. So if you can see that way, then you'll learn to fight with the proper weapons in life, and you'll take your thoughts captive. You'll appropriate faith, hope, and love as your weapon, not just reaction, not just reacting to every issue, distorting it, making it something that it's not. He said, like, we have to demolish every arrogant attitude that is raised up in defiance of the true knowledge of God. Why? Because there's always a true reality going on in every situation. And then there's our reality, right? Track with me here. There's a true reality, and then there's how we feel reality. There's a true reality and how we feel. And often how we feel is not a mirrored image of the truth. And so he's saying here, okay, there are attitudes that are forming in your perspective, thoughts that are bad, that are shaping and designing your perspective and your view of this situation, that are causing you to feel a certain way, and that's not even really what's going on. You're not seeing the truth of what's going on up here. And if you can take a step back, get a little bit of an aerial view, you'll be able to use faith, hope, and love against the battle you're facing. Because then he says this, we have to capture, like prisoners of war, every thought, every attitude, and insist that it bow in obedience to the Anointed One. Okay, I feel this. I think this because I feel this. And okay, but if I apply faith, hope, and love against this individual right now, Jean is really offending me. He's really bothering me right now. Not true, but he's really bothering me right now. Something that he's doing or not doing, and I got to think, okay, faith, hope, and love. Okay, I got to see it in context. If I have context, it changes everything. But sometimes to get context, I have to first apply faith, hope, and love because I so love this guy, I'm willing to look past what's happening and see that something else could be motivating and influencing the situation. So really today, in the short time that I have left, I want to talk about Caleb. Everyone say Caleb. That is kind of random. Now I'm just going to jump. I'm jumping into a new I'm shifting right now. And I want to talk about a story that many of you know where Israel had been delivered from captivity under the hand of Pharaoh hundreds of years. Yet they had a promise that one day they would occupy the land. A promise that really started in the Garden of Eden, that passed down through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they would, and they all lived in this land, but that their descendants would multiply, and they'd have the land, and whatever their foot would tread, this would be an inheritance for their descendants. And it was a big promise. And now Israel is in captivity in Egypt under the hand of Pharaoh, 400 years, generation after generation. And now Moses is raised up. He's raised up at age 80 years old to go back into Egypt because he had fled. He had been, in a sense, exiled by his own decision, fled, went back to Egypt, and became the deliverer of his people under the hand of Pharaoh. So now they've crossed the Red Sea. They've seen some amazing things. They've had like the Ten Commandments. They've been on Mount Sinai. They've been through some stuff. It's been within a 3-year period of time. And now they're at a place where they potentially could go into the promised land, to go into fulfill their promise. Now, most of you know in this room that the Israelites wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. They didn't have to. Do you know that a lot of the time that you spend wandering, you don't have to spend wandering? Sometimes it's just listening to that still small voice and saying, okay, I got to adjust this, do this. You don't have to run in circles. But these guys, they didn't want to listen to God. They kept hardening their hearts. They were stubborn. They were a stubborn people. And so I heard this statement one time. And it was, I forget who it was. It was a story I read about a prime minister of one country that had like, I don't know how many people. It was like, more than the population of Canada, and which isn't really that much. And that this prime minister was talking to the prime minister of Israel at the time, and they were talking about their countries or whatever, and the one over Israel made a comment basically saying, yeah, it must be so easy to lead your people or whatever, and they were bantering back and forth, and he's saying, well, why? We have way more people than you. He's like, well, hey, it's different for me because, you may have like, 100 million of these kind of people. Well, I have like, however, I don't know what the population of Israel is. I have like 30 or 50 million prime ministers that I got to lead. Speaking of the stubbornness of the Jewish people. Anyways, I thought it was kind of funny, but just to bring perspective of the way this culture was wired at the time, they just couldn't get it. So Moses is at a crossroads, and his assistant Aaron and Miriam started to complain about Moses' leadership and about why they should have went back to Egypt. This is too hard. It's too much for them. And so they started to complain. And so God rebuked Miriam and Aaron and said, okay, Moses, time to shift some gears here. I want you to get 12 spies. 12 spies were at the brink of entering into Canaan, which is the promised land, which is the promise that had been prophesied for hundreds of years. You're at the brink of entering in. I want you to send 12 spies that represent the 12 tribes of Israel, and I want you to send them in, look to see if the soil is fertile, look to see if there's like harvest, look to see what kind of vegetation there is, look to see if there's fortified cities, are they walled cities, are they not walled, what kind of enemies are there. I want to get a lay of the land, basically. So they sent these spies for 40 days into the land of Canaan. 2 of the 12 was Joshua, who was Moses' assistant, and Caleb. Caleb represented the tribe of Judah, and Joshua the tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim actually means fruitfulness, and Judah means praise. Very interesting. Out of the 12 spies, only 2 of them came back with a good report. Now, I want to read this to you. Are you with me here? Track with me. Numbers 13, verse 25 to 28 says, after exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces. Now, so they see all this amazing fruit. So the report starts off pretty positive, right? Right? Awesome fruit. In fact, the fruit was so big. The fruit was so big. The harvest, and that season, the harvest of grapes were happening. The fruit was so big, they needed like people together to carry the cluster of grapes back. They were so big and juicy. This is before they ever pumped steroids into our vegetation. And these were like heavenly steroids, okay? Like Holy Ghost steroids, antibiotics into the fruit. It was like big. It was heavy fruit, okay? So they came back. And in verse 28, this is what the people said. It says this, but, everyone say but. But the people living there, because this is the thing, if the enemy can put a but in front of your face, you can't see properly. The enemy majors in putting big butts in front of your face. And if he can put a big butt, he knows it's going to block your view. And if he blocks your view, you'll have a discouraged perspective of what's beyond the butt. Because the devil likes big butts, and he can't deny it. That's just the reality. He's always about the butt. Remember that. Always remember that. The devil likes big butts, and he will not deny it. I was going to say he cannot lie, but the devil does lie. He's the father of all lies, so I can't use that. He won't deny the fact that he loves big butts. It says, but, everyone say but with me. The people living there are powerful. So it went from like, awesome, man, like fertile soil, like the harvest is happening. Look at these grapes, it's amazing. And what? But the potential to occupy the land, the fulfillment of the prophecy, like, come on, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden, but is in the face. But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. So all of a sudden, their faith went from what could be to now what can't be because of the but in their face. The last 2 weeks we talked about protecting the prophetic, and I talked about how we're all prophetic in nature when we represent the heart and mind of God, and I really simplified what being prophetic meant, and if you've let Jesus into your life, you are a prophetic representation of the heart and mind of God into every situation. And the second week, last week, I talked about protecting the environment and how your prosperity is really connected to the people in your life. But today, I want to talk about, for the next few minutes, protect the attitude. But to protect the attitude, you got to move your butt. You got to move your butt. Say to the neighbor beside you, move your butt, because your butt's way too big. I'm just joking. That would be an offense to some people. Sorry. Your butt's not too big, but move your butt. Some of your butts are actually too big. In the spirit. In the spirit. In the spirit. I mean, some people like big butts. Hey, listen, I'm not trying to get into a hole here, but I'm just saying that some of the spiritual butts in your life are way too big. They're just blocking your view. You got to move them out of your way. You got to don't slap that butt. Get it out of the way. Move the butt out of your way. I'm making myself laugh because I'm a little bored right now. So I'm just joking. No. Protect the attitude. Move your butt. Because your attitude represents, write this down, your heart's altitude in any given situation. Your attitude towards a situation is a reflection of your heart's altitude in any given situation. What do I mean by that? Is that what you believe here will affect your outlook. So your attitude is a result of where your heart is positioned. And if your heart has an elevation to see like God sees, then that will directly affect your attitude towards a person or towards a situation. If you're appropriating faith, hope, and love, then guess what? Your attitude will be good. It will be the byproduct of an elevated heart to see and approach things like God does. You got to protect the attitude. Paul said to the church at Ephesus in chapter 4, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. This is an everyday thing. Now, this week, I had a really interesting challenge that's never happened to me before, never wanted to happen to me again. In fact, I feel a sense of paranoia now about it happening to me, to the place where when I was playing with my son yesterday, I was wearing these really uncomfortable goggles as we were playing Nerf Wars because I was paranoid of what could potentially happen. Because on Sunday night last week, I was playing with one of my kids and they scratched my left eye really bad just below the pupil. And so I had a severe cornea abrasion. And so any higher, it would have done potentially some permanent damage. But I went into emergency Sunday night super late, and it was honestly one of the most it was painful. The head, the pain here, I couldn't. And as a result, this is the most annoying thing about it, I couldn't open both eyes. Because if you blink one eye, it strains the other eye, like it pulls it. You can't just blink one eye without having any pull on the other eye. And so when I would close one eye, try to open up the other eye, it would strain the damaged eye, and it was the most painful thing. So I had to keep both eyes closed. It was mental torture, okay? Let me just tell you, I have an amazing appreciation for having the sense of sight now that I never had before. And so I went into it was a severe cornea abrasion, and the only thing that I could take for it was time. He said it will take at least 72 hours. And so literally for the first day and a half, almost 2 days, I sat in a dark room with both eyes closed. And I was mad. I'd love to sit here and be like, I was a man of faith. Came into the room blind, and I'm like, I'm only going to see when I go blind. It's like Paul, went blind for 3 days, and then he really saw, the reality of what God's call on his life. But I was mad. I wasn't a man of faith at all. I was annoyed. I had a bad attitude. I had never experienced this before. I'm like, now I feel like I've lost my sense. I had to literally, and I couldn't even stimulate myself. Like, I couldn't, watch anything, couldn't listen to anything. I had to sit in a dark room. Listening was like, it was, when you get overstimulated and you're in pain? Is that ever, I just couldn't handle it. And so my attitude, though, it was bad. And Michelle saw it, and Michelle's a seasoned veteran in sickness and disease, and so she reminds me of how weak and wimpy I am often as a husband when I get the flu or whatever. Most men are like that, right? Any men feel me? Women, you push out babies, you deal with all the painful stuff, and we have a flu, and it seems like it lasts forever, and we need you to help us and take care of us. But anyways, all that to say is, in this room, and I remember my attitude, and I kept thinking, well, I can't have a good attitude right now. I can't be in faith right now because I can't even I felt like I couldn't even talk. Even talking was annoying to me. Any stimulation. So sitting in a dark room, it was mental torment for me. And so maybe some of you are like, oh, it's not a big deal. You've had it. Well, you didn't have it as bad as me. So don't judge me. Okay? But I was thinking about this, and I'm going to finish the story in a second. I want to go to Numbers 14 really quick, and I want to jump down to verse 23. Go to Numbers 14, verse 23. 14, verse 23. Speaking now of Caleb, which I've talked about, and talking about him going, and the 12 spies going in, coming back out of the land of promise, the land of Canaan. In verse 23, this is what God said. He said, they will never see, they will never even see the land I swore to give their ancestors, because their attitude problem, because their perspective, and because their disobedience. None of those who have treated me with contempt will ever see it. Those words you never want to hear from God. Verse 24. But my servant Caleb has a different what? Attitude than the others have. He has remained loyal to me, so I will bring him into the land he explored. His descendants will possess their full share of that land. Do you know that your attitude towards situations affect the next generation? Your attitudes towards situations will affect what the next generation gets outside of the grace of God. I mean, God can show up, and I get that, but you are a huge part of preparing the next generation. Your attitude towards things. It's like church, It's like, well, I want to sing hymns and Gaither songs, and I want to sing Hillsong, and I want to sing Bethel, and I want to sing Elevation, and I want to sing gospel music, and I want to sing, Justin Bieber at church, and I want to sing. Everybody has a different preference. And then they get a bad attitude when their preference isn't met. But just think about this. When you have the right perspective and attitude towards anything in life, you set up the environment around you and the next generation to succeed. Caleb's descendants possessed the land because he had a right attitude. And it was only him, the Levites, and Joshua that were the ones that entered the land when they were in their 80s. Everybody else died off because they had a bad attitude. This is why you need to protect your attitude. A whole generation died off, never saw the promise because of their bad attitude and perspective. And the big butts they let stand in their face. They just entertained the butts. Anyways, okay, let's move on. I want to give you three quick things. I'm going to move through it. Three quick things. Just three quick points to take home with you today. To take home with you as practical keys. Everything that I said in the beginning was really a setup for this, and this is going to be quick, but three quick points that I want you to take home today that I believe Caleb protected his attitude through because he was willing to move his butt out of the way to manifest these key realities. And these key realities are what protected his butt, protected his attitude. Number one, you got to move your butt to action. Move your butt to action. I remember April 2017, I woke up out of a sleep and I heard the voice of God say to me, said these words to me, what determines the spirit of a culture is the actions and attitudes of that culture. It woke me up. I heard his voice say to me very clear. Often God will do that. I'll wake up hearing his voice. And I heard his voice saying, what determines the spirit of a culture are the actions and attitudes of that culture. Listen to the attitude of Caleb, okay? Really quick. Numbers 13, verse 30. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses because they were all bellyaching, all complaining. He said, let's go up at once to take the land. We can certainly conquer it. So here's this man of faith, different spirit, different attitude, and it says that everybody else disagreed with him. You ever been in a situation where you're confident and everybody else disagrees with you? Anybody in this room? Yeah, a few of you put your hands up. Because everybody else gets agreement on everything. I want to be your friend. Because, listen, when you proclaim faith, you're always going to have the but people. And you're going to start telling that butt to move out of your way. Move your butt out of the way. Move that thing out of, I don't want that thing in my face. It's distracting. You got to move your butt to action. He said, let's go up at once to take the land. He said, we can certainly conquer. I could tell you hundreds of stories where we had to do this. I just remember one story specifically where I was leading a team of 28 people down to Mardi Gras in a bus. And I had booked this bus. It was a big deal. And we were driving in a whole bunch of cars to a location. I believe it was in the U.S. somewhere. We were meeting up, parking our cars there, and then taking the bus down to New Orleans. It was a long trip. And I remember on the way there to get the bus on time, there was a massive snowstorm. I mean, it was a crazy blizzard. It was one of the worst of the year. And everybody was saying, don't drive, don't drive. And listen, we were already committed. I'm a commitment person. We were already committed. We were already locked in. We were already, set to go. Everything was done, ready to go. And, I'm like, there's no way that God would bring us this far into the process just to, cancel the whole thing or show up late and then alter the whole plan. And so, there was a whole bunch of butts that were jiggling in my face at that point. Move them out of the way. Move them out of the way. Get out of my way, these butts. Move them out of my way. Sorry, I'm just trying to wake you up a little bit. Trying to see if you're listening, okay? The fact that some of you laughed means that you're listening. Some of you are upset that I'm talking about the butt too much, but you'll get over it really quick, okay? Move those butts out of the way. And we went for it. And we drove in one of the worst blizzards. Nobody died. Nobody had an accident. We got there. And I just remember, this spirit, this faith came up to me, I don't care about the environment. Now, you might say, well, what about wisdom? Well, sometimes the wisdom of God is going against the wisdom of the world. And the wisdom of the world, that everything is so cautionary and careful and worrisome and anxious. Yeah, I know there's a line, but in this moment, I felt what Caleb felt, a different attitude towards it. No, God didn't bring us this far to the edge only to go backwards again. So we're hitting this thing, and we did it, and it was one of the greatest, most fruitful, testimony-driven outreaches that we'd ever done at Mardi Gras. And I believe it's solely because we saw without the but in our face. Like Caleb, let's go at once. And this kind of was happening to me. This is my struggle. When I had this cornea abrasion on my eye, I remember the first day, like I said, I was bad attitude. I was super upset. I was just annoyed, tormented, mentally annoyed with everything. I can't see. I'm in a dark room. What do you do? I don't like just sitting doing nothing. So imagine you're just sitting doing nothing. And you're like, well, why didn't you pray? And even just anything, any stimulation was annoying to me. It takes me a little bit. I got to adjust. Give me some time to adjust people. You know what I mean? That's what I was thinking in my mind. So I'm there, and my wife and I are interacting and trying to interact, and I'm frustrated. And I get up. I'm going to get up. And I attempted to change locations in the house, and I ran into the door. And that made me even, anybody, when you're in pain, and then you worsen the pain by running into the door, and then it's more mental torment, and then it's just I'm not even a Christian anymore, and it's that's what I feel like, how could I be a pastor? That's one of those moments. I was upset. I was very upset. Ran into the door. I didn't run into just the door. I ran into the thickness of the door, that part. It wasn't just a flat door, because it was partly open. It's just annoying. But I had to go through this and attempt to move to action. I remember, literally for a day and a half, I ate with my eyes closed. And my kids were laughing at me because I'm like, oh, they're like, no. I'm like, nothing on my spoon. No, nothing on my fork. No, move it over here. No, okay, can you just help me, please? Like, put my fork in the right place and feed me. It's an interesting experience. Move to action. Number 2, write this down. You got to move your butt to appreciation. You got to take action. You want to protect your attitude? Take action on things. Don't let your circumstance tell you what to do. You tell your circumstance what to do. You're going to take action. Number 2, you got to move your butt to appreciation. Appreciate the things that are happening. The fact that, man, I'm so thankful that I have 4 working senses. Like, holy cow, what would it be like to lose this sense? And all of a sudden appreciating that, wow, smell, taste, touch, hearing, this is amazing. Numbers 14, verse 6 and 7. 2 of the men who had explored the land, Joshua and Caleb, tore their clothing when they heard the reports of people using their butt as the excuse. Verse 7, they said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. You guys, don't just look at the butt. Don't just look at the giants and the fortified cities and all the problems. Look at the fact that it's a wonderful land. Like, appreciate the good part. See a glass half full, not a glass half empty. Appreciating what you have. There you go. You should be down here. Focus on the goal. I just got to say this, that coming out of this experience, it lasted 72 hours, like the doctor prophesied. And I got out of it, and man, I was so thankful. But the weird thing is, okay, so we're in this series called, Insight, Sight for Flight, talking about if we can't see, we stumble. I go blind. That's why I'm like, God, forget my titles and my prophetic themes. This is going to screw my life up. So, just forget that for, not really. But I'm in this season all about sight. I feel like I'm blind for 3 days. And it's the same week that I had a scheduled interview for Nexus from 6 months ago that I couldn't move. And Nexus, if you're familiar with that at the airport, is all about, an eyeball scan. It's all about, getting through customs quick. And I've always had a Nexus card, and so I got to renew my Nexus card, and the whole thing centered around the eyeball. And here's the week of all weeks. I have the scheduled interview to renew my Nexus card from 6 months ago. I go blind during our series, and I have to go to an interview where it's all centered around this eyeball scan. I'm like, what is going on? Man, I'm super prophetic. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, man, but it just sucks that I got to be the message for you. See, I offended somebody. I'm just joking. Protect the attitude. Number 3, last point, and we're done. Move your butt to awareness. Move your butt to awareness. It says in chapter 14 of verse 8 to 9, and if the Lord is pleased with us, Caleb and Joshua, the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into the land and give it to us. It's a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. Listen to this last statement. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us, so don't be afraid of them. This attitude, it shaped this perspective in Caleb and Joshua of a great awareness of the protection of God. That if God brought us this far, he'll bring us all the way. God will never lead you to something and then not lead you through it. He'd be a jerk. And God ain't no jerk. We're the jerk. We're the ones that twist things and distort things. And God's like, listen, I promise you this, I'll lead you through it if I've led you to it. You're at the line, you guys. Trust me. There was an awareness, but because the people voted no, they became a spiritual democracy. No, because the people voted no, they didn't go into the promised land. It's okay, I got to get rid of all of them. They don't want to go? Fine, I'm going to get rid of all of them. And only Joshua and Caleb that had the good attitude, and a new generation below the age of 20, and the Levites will be the only ones that will go into the promised land because they protected their attitude. But it took them 40 years. 40 years. I remember the moment things began to change for me in my eye. I don't know when it was. I think it was day 2 or the end of day 2 or something. I got up and I was like, oh, that's it. moving to action. I'm appreciating. I have an awareness now. Okay, God's gonna speed this up a little bit. I have to go to this eyeball scan. I have to go to this Nexus interview. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting up. So I got up and I went into the mirror. I don't know if Michelle heard me, and I was in the bathroom, and I started commanding my eye. I'm like, open. And I'm like stretching my eye open. And I'm like, in Jesus' name. And I was like, literally, it was hurting so much. And I was commanding my eye to be healed. I was like speaking to the abrasion. Get out of my eyeball right now. I was getting mad. It was a mixture of anger and faith. But at least what was happening in my heart and in my spirit was that my attitude was changing towards the situation. Okay, it's going to happen. It's going to stop. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's not going to be as painful.